Hello and welcome to episode 238 of Stand Up. After a few days off, I am back and rested with Dr. Prakash Gatta and Dr. Arthur Caplan. I am Pete Dominic. You are listening to Stand Up. Let's do this. Hello, my friends. I hope you had a good, weird Thanksgiving holiday and break. I hope, like me, you were able to take a couple of days off, whatever that means. I hope you're creative with your time, and or not. I wasn't. I did very little the first couple of days. Had a COVID scare at our house when my daughter had several symptoms following a test. A day after she got her test, a friend of hers, mom, tested positive, and so then I was really sure. Then her test came back on Thanksgiving Day negative, and so what to think? It was never and is not bad. I appreciate your concerns. I did put a tweet out saying, looks like she might have it, and I asked her permission for that, but I didn't ask my wife, and I should have. My wife asked that I delete that tweet and ask her in the future before tweeting about our daughter's health, and so I ate my balls on that, rightfully so. I don't know what I was thinking with that. That was a stupid thing to do, but many of you did reach out and express your concerns, and it was definitely a worrisome and uneasy time. I consulted a whole bunch of friends and doctors about, how do you handle it? I was a little bit caught off guard with the idea of not knowing exactly what the rules should be if someone in your house is showing symptoms and how exactly you need to isolate from them and so on. So I learned a lot very quickly thanks to a lot of expert friends, two of which are going to be joining me on today's program. Very excited to have Dr. Arthur Caplan, and he's a bioethicist, of course, and my friend, longtime listener, General Surgeon Dr. Prakash Gatta, who himself still recovering from COVID-19. Lots to discuss. Before I get to my guests, a bunch of clips I want to play and help you catch up. Always do some news and an audio roundup, almost always at the beginning of the episode. But first and foremost, I want to say we're very close to having 800 subscribers to this podcast. Of course, several thousand folks listen every day to the podcast. And about almost 800 of you are actually paying subscribers, which gives you all kinds of extra benefits, and you can become part of the community. And this podcast is free, but it isn't cheap. And those of you who pay are the reason why I can have this independent media outlet where every day I reach out to my expert friends, of which I have a lot. And based on my career and reputation, I'm able to get all kinds of influential, brilliant people to join me to ask all the questions that you want the answers to. How do I know? Because you always let me know who you'd like me to talk to and what you'd like me to ask. And that's what I do best. Ask good questions, if anything. Not always, but thank you for signing up for a paid subscription. But how do we get to 800? I get paid at the end of the month from the podcast, and today is the last day you can sign up. And suggestion coming from several listeners that why not get Stand Up for a gift? The gift of enlightenment and being a member of a community. We have hangouts on Zoom, as well as a 24/7 conversation going on the Discord platform. And it's been an amazing just over a year getting to know folks and doing the podcast every day. So maybe get a gift for somebody else or sign up now if you haven't already. Just go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. All right, let's get to 800 by the end of the day. Can we do it? Moving on. We've got a lot to discuss here, and I want to start with the latest headlines about COVID-19 and the pandemic, which, of course, is worsening. New numbers, new concerns. The most disconcerting headline I read was that Japan's suicides are now exceeding COVID deaths. I didn't read past that headline. That was enough for me to see at the Drudge Report, but that was pretty horrific to see. In Japan, more people are killing themselves than dying of COVID. And other international COVID news, the president of Brazil says no matter what, he's not getting the vaccine. I'm not getting it. That is a Portuguese accent or Italian. It doesn't matter. Jair Bolsonaro, I think you pronounce the J as a Y, says no matter what, he is not getting the vaccine. Here it is. I saw this in the New York Times. I'm telling you, I'm not going to take it. It's my right, President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil declared, and preempting that the will he or won't he question that he will inevitably face once a vaccine becomes available. And we talk vaccine today with Dr. Arthur Caplan, everything you want to know in that conversation coming up. The president of Brazil joked on Twitter last month that vaccination would be required only for his dog. And on Thursday, he repeated his opposition to making vaccines mandatory. Still, he did say how kind of him that any vaccine, life-saving vaccine, approved by the country's health authorities would be available to any Brazilian who wanted it. How kind. Brazil's got their own Trump. What an asshole this guy is. And one more international COVID story. This is a good one coming from my friends in Australia via the New York Times. It was time for a victory lap in Victoria, the Australian state that in recent months had lived through one of the world's most stringent lockdowns. After 28 days with no new cases and no deaths, officials declared its outbreak, which spread from hotels where arriving travelers were quarantined during the summer, over. The reaction was immediate. Wow, just wow, said economist Richard Dennis. I don't even know if he's Australian. Yeah, he's the executive director of the Australian Institute. He said, wow, just wow. Precautions are not over yet. People in Victoria are still required to wear masks while indoors. There are limitations on gatherings, but Daniel Andrews, the premier of Victoria, plans to announce an easing of the restrictions on December 6th, and he's planning to say, we've got an easing of the restrictions, and more probably as well. But trade-offs, because Australia is also suffering the worst heat wave ever this early in their summer. It's their summer down there, and this was the hottest day ever in November in Australia. Well, at least they don't have COVID. And experts are saying the U.S. is rounding the corner into a calamity, according to CNN.com, with COVID-19 deaths projected to double soon. They write, as Thanksgiving week draws to an end, more experts are warning the COVID-19 pandemic will likely get much worse in the coming weeks before a possible vaccine begins to offer some relief. More than 205,000 new cases were reported Friday, which likely consists of both Thursday and Friday reports in some cases, or at least 20 states did not report COVID-19 numbers on Thanksgiving. As of Saturday evening, more than 138,000 new cases and 1,100 deaths had been reported, according to Johns Hopkins University. And the U.S. has now reported more than 100,000 infections every day for 26 consecutive days. The daily average in the week to Friday was more than 166,000, almost 2.5 times higher than the summer's peak counts in July. That's all according to CNN.com, Johns Hopkins, the COVID tracking project, and the so many other metrics about hospitals reaching capacity, the fact that it's happening in all across the country as opposed to being focused in just a couple of cities. So healthcare providers and frontline workers can't necessarily go to those cities. They all have to stay wherever they're stationed because COVID is everywhere. Experts saying we can't let our guard down. The vaccines will make a big difference in the spring and summer. They're not going to make a difference right now. Based on current COVID-19 numbers, guys, in the U.S., this country, our country, is far from rounding the corner. Professor Jonathan Reiner, Professor of Medicine at George Washington University, predicted last week the country's daily death toll would likely double in 10 days, and soon we would see 4,000 deaths a day. Hard to fathom. Really just hard to imagine those kinds of numbers. So be smart, everybody. Stay at home. I didn't realize this, but apparently there's no evidence that COVID is that you can get it from surfaces. I didn't realize that there was zero evidence of that. I knew it was hard, but it's hard to measure apparently how anybody. It's impossible apparently to see exactly how people necessarily contract it. But there's at the same time been no surface area contraction as well, is my understanding. If that's not what you've heard, let me know. But I think you can tone it down with all of the wiping everything down, that's for sure. And even washing your hands necessarily, because you touched a door handle that somebody else touched. It's not necessarily a way that you can get it. If you're not shaking hands with somebody, it's not as much of a concern. The best thing you can do is stay away from people and stay away from people who've been around other people, and be transparent and honest about it. And then we can maybe make it through the next few months and with less death. I mean, it's just so morbid. 4,000 deaths a day. It's hard to talk about. And yes, this episode is answering, though, a lot of the questions, I think, on the latest, especially with Dr. Arthur Caplan coming up. So let's move on to politics, shall we? Where our baby in chief, Donald Trump, is still crying and whining and saying that he got cheated and that the entire election is rigged. And he was on with Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business today, and her name was trending, and it was trending because it was an absolutely horrific and disgusting, insane panoply of lies. And the big question, the most important question, really is, it would be easy to try to ignore Trump if he wasn't trying to destroy everything he can on the way out, maybe starting a war with Iran to leave to Joe Biden. I'll get to that in a moment. And you want to not pay attention to him, but he is still relevant. And I think the most important thing right now in our country is the Georgia runoff election. If you're not paying attention, if you're not trying to be involved with that election any way that you can, then please do, because that election is everything. The early voting in the runoff election begin in just a couple of weeks in Georgia. If you know anybody in Georgia, contact them, call them, tell them to talk to me. I'll talk to them on the podcast, whatever we can do to help both Democrats win in Georgia, thus giving Democrats control of the Senate for Joe Biden, a Democratic president. It's everything, folks. And it's rare that runoff elections generate this much interest among voters, but Georgia is going to be the case. And the question about Donald Trump is, what role will he play? Will he help or hurt the Republicans? Will he help or hurt the election when he's sitting here shitting all over both the Republican governor and the Republican Secretary of State, questioning legitimacy of the outcome of the election which they hand counted. I think they've counted it 3 times, and Trump keeps losing. There's no evidence of fraud, and he's accusing them of basically taking payoffs. You got to hear what he said about both Brian Kemp and the Secretary of State of Georgia, both who supported him, who voted for him, and now, like everybody else in his life, he has thrown them in the garbage. Here's Trump taking questions from reporters last week, calling the Georgia Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, quote, enemy of the people. Listen to this weird, crappy audio that I could only find versions of everywhere.
I understand the Secretary of State, who is really, he's an enemy of the people. The Secretary of State, and whether he's Republican or not, this man, what he's done, supposedly he made a deal, and you'll have to check this, where she's allowed to harvest, but in other areas they're not allowed. What kind of a deal is that? They're not allowed to harvest during the presidential. But how?
If we had to drink every time the president said harvest, we would all be saturated with alcohol, because he's not going to stop talking about harvesting. But imagine this guy, Brad Raffensperger, he wrote an op-ed in the USA Today where he said Georgia had a smooth and successful November election, noting that the state finally defeated voting lines. He wrote, this should be something for Georgians to celebrate, whether their favored presidential candidate won or lost. He asserted, for those wondering, mine lost. My family voted for him. We donated to him. And now we're being thrown under the bus by him. This guy, Brad Raffensperger, the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia, who is an outspoken Trump supporter, is now getting violent threats from Trump's crazy supporters. And that's not all. The president is also going after the governor of Georgia, who was the former Secretary of State, who's a terrible guy, who also pledged allegiance to Donald Trump. Brian Kemp couldn't have licked Trump's shoes and ass any more than he did. And here is what Trump said about the governor of Georgia. These two guys in the state where there's a runoff election, Trump could care less about what happens to the Senate. He knows he's not going to be there to deal with it. He's going to destroy it all. Here he is talking to Maria Bartiromo about Governor Sean Kemp, also a Republican who loved Trump.
Everything has to be approved by the legislature. And they had judges making deals, and they had electoral officials making deals, like this character in Georgia who's a disaster. And the governor's done nothing. He's done absolutely nothing. I'm ashamed that I endorsed him. But I look at what's going on. It's so terrible.
Oh, shut up. Whatever. Or keep talking. No, keep talking. Keep disparaging Georgia's Republican governor and Secretary of State. Keep telling your supporters, Republicans in Georgia who love you, that the voting system in Georgia is fraudulent and let Democrats and progressives go out and vote for the Democrats to take over the Senate. It's crazy what he's doing, but it's just more proof that he could care less about the conservative agenda, the Republican Party, the United States Senate majority. He doesn't care. He's burning it all down. Speaking of burning it all down, that takes me to another story, a foreign policy story, which you probably have heard about. But all right, here it is from the Saturday front page of the New York Times. Top Iranian scientist for nuclear program is killed in an attack. U.S. believes he led weapons push Israel is said to be behind death. A number of names on this story from the New York Times where they write, Iran's top nuclear scientist, long identified by American and Israeli intelligence as the guiding figure behind a covert effort to design an atomic warhead, was shot and killed Friday in what Iranian media called a roadside ambush as he and his bodyguards traveled outside Tehran. His name was Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, and he was apparently, according to the New York Times and other sources, the driving force behind what American Israeli officials described as Iran's secretive nuclear weapons program. And there is just so much to say about that. I'll try to get some people on to discuss what this means this week. Who would you like to hear from? And here is Admiral McRaven, the former Navy admiral in control, command of the U.S. Special Forces in charge of the bin Laden raid. He was on This Week on ABC, hosted by Martha Raddatz, who started with this question to Admiral McRaven.
To you, Admiral. I want to get to those cabinet nominees in a moment, but I want to start with the news out of Iran. Iran's top nuclear scientist was assassinated in a brazen ambush on Friday, and many are pointing the finger at Israel. Iran is vowing revenge, but given that President Trump seems to be itching for an excuse to strike Iran, do you think Iran might just let this pass?
Well, of course, we've been dealing with the Iranians in the region for, 40 plus years in terms of the tension. The biggest issue going forward, of course, is that Iran, either suspects or knows that Israel was responsible for this attack. And then, of course, kind of by association, they're going to assume that we either collaborated with it or at a minimum were witting of the Israelis' actions. So now the biggest issue is who is going to misstep. The Iranians are going to be in a position where they have to retaliate. I don't see any way around it. They're going to have to save face. And so now the issue becomes, what does that retaliation look like? Does that then begin to escalate the problems in the region? And that's not going to be good for anybody. The Iranians don't want to go to war with us. We don't want to go to war with Iran. So everybody needs to do the best they can to kind of lower the temperature and try not to get this into an escalation mode.
More reaction to this. Let's go to Trita Parsi, who I've interviewed many times. Smart Iranian American relations expert. He was on MSNBC's AM Joy. Here's Trita.
Well, the latest that's happened is that the Iranian president have come out with a statement essentially saying that Iran is not going to walk into what he called them trap by the Israelis to escalate and create a war, because that is, in his assessment, what the Israelis want. But it is not clear if that is the view of other elements inside the country. Some of this debate is starting to be taking place in public, in which the argument that is made by the other side is that these assassinations continue to take place precisely because, in their view, the Iranians have not responded harshly enough to previous attacks. And the only way of preventing future attacks is to respond really harshly to this one. If that happens, however, then there is a very significant risk for a major escalation, potentially a war, which, according to Rouhani, is what Netanyahu is looking for.
That's Trita Parsi on MSNBC's AM Joys with the Quincy Institute. He'd be a good guest. I've had him on a couple times. I should get him back. Also, I thought Lawrence Wilkerson made some great comments here. I love this guy, Lawrence Wilkerson. Look him up. He was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and he did some very, very brave things, stopping other pilots from committing war crimes by putting his helicopter in between them and civilians on the ground. It's an amazing story. He was also Colin Powell's chief of staff and conscience at times. He's now a professor at William & Mary. also been on the show many times, and I should probably reach out and get him on. But this is what he had to say about, and I thought it was really important, the most important comments I heard, and I've heard this for a long time. Bibi Netanyahu wants to have a war with Iran, but he wants American forces and the American government behind that war. The anchor, Maria Teresa Kumar, asked Lawrence Wilkerson whether or not he thought the Americans knew, if we knew, that Israel was going to carry out this assassination.
It would be extremely unusual, Maria Teresa. I have to believe it was informed. Trump's whole effort now seems to be to befoul the recent elections, so I don't think he's very attentive to it, but Mike Pompeo, as Secretary of State, is. And I'll remind your viewers of what Secretary of Defense Robert Gates said, now my Chancellor at William & Mary, that the Saudis are willing to fight the Iranians to the last dead American. And I would add Bibi Netanyahu in that. I think that's what we're looking at here. They want, as a major outcome, a war. As a middle ground outcome, they want a bombing campaign by the U.S. against Iranian nuclear facilities. And as a minimum outcome, they want to foreclose any possibility of the new president, Joe Biden, re-entering the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear agreement with Iran. And it looks like they're well on that road to success.
All right, two big important stories, the Georgia runoff and everything around that, as well as the assassination of the Iranian nuclear scientists. Of course, you had the Supreme Court's decision that came down just minutes before midnight on Wednesday. The justices issued 6 opinions, several of them unusually bitter, according to Adam Liptak, the New York Times, and upholding challenges from churches and synagogues to state pandemic restrictions. The reaction to this court decision was pretty intense, and including my own. My friend Elie Mystal, the Nation magazine legal correspondent, tweeted, Amy Coney Barrett got to elevate religious institutions over secular law and spread COVID at the same time in her first 5-4 tie-breaking decision. Expand the damn courts before these Republicans kill us all. Mark Joseph Stern of Slate legal correspondent tweeted, here's what we know for sure. It's now open season on COVID restrictions at the Supreme Court. Churches around the country will challenge these rules and win. The days of COVID limits on church attendance are ending, just as we enter a dangerous new phase of infections. And our friend Eric Siegel tweeted at Eastman Siegel, his wife Lynn, says the court changing 5-4 case on religion because one vote changed is good for my thesis about court not being a court, which is true, but frankly, I'd rather the court not kill people to prove I'm right. He also said, Judge Amy Coney Barrett fails first test bigly. No surprise. This will only last 40 more years. And Siegel also tweeted, in 5 years, Barrett will show she's 2 standard deviations to the right of Scalia, 1 deviation to the right of Thomas, and may end up being the least liked justice of all. Unless you're religious, she'll take your rights away with a smile. Bet on it. So, Dr. Doomsday, Professor Gloomsburg strikes again Eric Siegel's reaction to the Supreme Court news from last week. Those are the 3 big stories that I wanted to mention and play some audio from. And now it's time for a quick news dump. News dump. News dump is brought to you by GiveWell. GiveWell.org/standup. If you want to know where your money will go the furthest this giving season, go to GiveWell.org/standup. Speaking of giving well, time to give money to food pantries. A growing number of Americans are going hungry. 26 million now saying they don't have enough food to eat as the pandemic worsens and holidays near, according to the Washington Post. And while I'm at thewashingtonpost.com, which I subscribe to, there's a headline that says Joe Biden hires all-female senior communications team, names Neera Tanden director of OMB. Late on Sunday, we found out President-elect Joe Biden has filled out his economics and communications teams, enlisting mostly women, including several of color, in a move that reflected his campaign pledge to create an administration that presents a diverse face to America as it tackles twin pandemic and economic crises. Learn more about that at thewashingtonpost.com and everywhere else reported on everybody that Joe Biden is choosing and nominating to work in his administration. And speaking of Joe Biden, he apparently fractured his foot while playing with his dog. And one of his crazy lawyers, Jenna Ellis, tweeted, "I'm waiting for the ridiculous headlines that would immediately be written if this were President Trump that got hurt while playing with his dog." And the reactions to her tweet were swift. At Perelman1 tweets, "Trump's girdle and diapers would restrict any playing with dogs." Bill Madden tweets, "Joe Biden twists his ankle while playing with his dog. Besides the fact that Trump hates dogs, it's going to be nice having a president who's emotionally secure enough to be honest with the American people when he injures himself." At Proof of Brain tweets, "Trump is afraid of dogs. What kind of man is scared of dogs?" And finally, a guy named Robert Stone tweeted, "Dogs are smart. They don't like Trump." That's what I found, at least. All right, moving on. The mysterious silver monolith in the Utah desert has disappeared. I'm obsessed with that story. If you are too, let's talk about it. Violence in Afghanistan. Horrific news out of Afghanistan, where a car bomb killed at least 40 Afghan soldiers in Afghanistan's central province of Ghazni, wounded 24 more. An attacker detonated an explosive-packed vehicle in front of a security base. So that will give you some perspective on your life, as it always does mine, and reading the news. And that's a good part about News Dump. And I always like to end on a fun one, and this one is a Santa-related News Dump story. In New York, the New York Times writes, "There will be less ho-ho-hoing, fewer fake beards, and officially anyway, no inebriated Santas roaming the streets on December 12th. That was the date of an annual alcohol-fueled bar crawl known as SantaCon. It's been canceled for 2020. Quote, all the reindeer got the Rona, the organizers wrote on their website, so we elves have advised Santa to hold off in-person merriment. Cancellation will be welcome news in neighborhoods that see the red-suited street happening as more naughty than nice. The organizers' advice, remain home and stay on the good list." All right, that is your stand-up news dump. Brought to you by givewell.org/standup. Okay, let's get to my first guest, NYU bioethicist Arthur Caplan. Dr. Arthur Caplan is a highly coveted expert on all things medical ethics, bioethics. He created the department at Columbia University and University of Minnesota, where he also taught, as well as Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine. He is now in Philadelphia, that is. He is now at NYU School of Medicine, where he's the founding head of the Division of Medical Ethics there. He's on Twitter at Arthur Caplan, and this Wednesday he is hosting an important conference about the youth perspective on COVID-19 with a great panel that you can register for free at. We talk about that in this interview. Here now, my conversation from a guy I always learn so much from, Professor Dr. Arthur Caplan, who, by the way, sound goes a little bit in and out. I think it's fine. And you hear a lot of dogs and phones ringing, but I kept it all in. It sounded like he was at a kennel, a very busy one.
It's funny, by the way, your studio, every time we talk, is upgrading.
Yeah, thank you for noticing. It's almost there. I'm going to just do a little bit more. Well, I might fiddle with some things. Lighting is something that really impresses people, Art. That's what I've learned. You put a little pink light on, and people are like, wow, you're a real pro. No, it's just a pink light. I'm in a shed. Great to see you. Thank you for joining me. And I have a ton to talk with you about. First of all, we haven't talked since the election or since, I think, some of the vaccines, the news of the vaccines. So there's a lot to discuss there. But my first question is, are you generally really excited or positive about that we have 3 vaccines, 2 of which show to be like over 90%? What are your thoughts on the news of these vaccines and their effectiveness?
Well, sometimes when we get into the ethics discussions, it's a long litany of misery. But I'm really excited by these results. I think they're great, and I think they're unexpected. And I think it's a tremendous scientific achievement that they got 3 vaccines out of the box in less than a year. We had this thing in March, April, and here come vaccines by November, December. That's pretty impressive. I trust the data. I think the data safety and monitoring boards, which are independent from the companies that make these things, have said they look good. That's where the numbers come from. It's true that we don't have all the data. This is what we call science by press release. You're just announcing, this looks good and our independent board said so. We haven't really had people go through the data point by point, but still the companies are unlikely to announce this in this way unless they had it.
Right.
So I think light at the end of the tunnel. That said, I've never been a believer that the only thing we ought to do about this plague is develop vaccines.
Right.
We still stink on other things, but the vaccine news is good.
Staying with the vaccine news, of course, and unfortunately, this pandemic means that you're in high demand. So I always appreciate you joining me. But there's so many questions about bioethics based on a pandemic and how we behave and the choices we make, and obviously things like medicine and vaccines. So the big question for you, I think, to answer, and you have been in every place that you publish and talk, is distribution. What are your concerns? How should this vaccine be distributed? And what are your concerns about how it will be distributed? And I suppose the answer might be different now that we have a federal government run by Joe Biden and not Donald Trump. But given that.
Well, look, the difference that the Biden administration coming in makes is that there's going to be more trust in vaccines and vaccine data and claims about vaccines. When Trump was there, he kept saying, I need this vaccine by tomorrow. I need it by election day. And everybody knew he was pushing inside the FDA and other agencies to get the vaccines approved. That's cutting corners. That's making people nervous. So you could see the polls were bumping up and up, people saying, I'm not taking it. I don't trust it. I think I saw some as high as 50%. With Biden, that's going to stop. And he's not going to be pushing the scientists around. He'll listen to them. They'll set the tone. And I think that'll help restore trust in vaccines. That's the good news. The bad news is that means there are more people who want them. That means the demand is greater. That means we're going to have allocation questions. But I'm going to predict as soon as the first wave of people get vaccines, pass through, do okay, get protected, demand will start escalating, and we'll move away from how do I get people to trust vaccines to how do I get vaccines to people who are screaming for them. So I'm watching for that shift. I predict that January, February, we'll see that happen. Okay, so that said, who's first? And I think one cut is it Americans or other people in the world? So should we share our supply of vaccines, even the first ones that come through, with anybody else? And I'm going to say no. I think we take care of our own first. I think that we have an obligation. It's like taking care of your family before you help the neighbors. I think it's like taking care of someone who's in your community before you go outside the community. Morally, I think there is a case that you help your own first. Now, it should be the neediest first, not just anybody who's low risk.
Your own most vulnerable.
Yeah, your own most vulnerable, your own most needy. So we're going to do our
Chris Christie.
Well, there's a tale of jumping the line, so to speak, which I hope we don't see again. And by the way, Ben Carson did it, and so did Trump. And
what you're talking about here, and I mentioned that, I make that joke because Chris Christie, didn't get the vaccine first, but you're talking about who should. He got a certain type of treatment, as did Ben Carson,
They all got those experimental antibodies, which have now been approved for the rest of us, thank you, for early access, but they jumped the line. They all did. In fact, Trump intervened for Carson to get him the medicine. Oh, wow. Well, shouldn't we take care of our former governors, our Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, who is actually a brain surgeon, and the president first? No, not really. I think they should all be in the same lottery, including the president, to get access. Now, if someone wants to say, hey, grow up, Art, the president is not going to be in a lottery and the president's going to get special attention, okay. Former governors, Secretary of Health and Human Services, no. I think they should go with everybody else. So if the goal is to distribute it to our own, in this case, Americans, yes, own most vulnerable, who are we talking about, and where do we put essential workers, healthcare workers in that most vulnerable category? Surprisingly, there's a lot of agreement that we got to do healthcare workers first. We're on the front lines. We don't have to do psychiatrists who are doing telemedicine, but we do have to do people who are in the ICU, right, who are working in the ER. And that, by the way, includes doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, people who get exposed, people who clean the rooms, people who bring the food in. It's got to be enough folks so that you can run your acute care units, your ICUs, your emergency departments. Why? Well, partly it's to protect those people because they are exposed heavily to the virus and sick people. It's partly to keep the health system going. You know this, Pete. Every day now we're seeing health systems report they're overwhelmed. We had it in New York back in March, April. We were getting too many people sick. rooms were getting set up at the convention center. Remember that at the Javits Center?
And the big point is
that.
It was concentrated in a couple cities. So I've read over and over the healthcare workers could come and help in those couple of cities. That is not available now. Now it's everywhere. You can't go.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Health systems tipping in Colorado, in Utah, and Minnesota. I keep reading, every day someone's saying we're at capacity.
And I don't read about how many new nurses, doctors, et cetera, are hired, but I do read that a lot of people are quitting because of fear and exhaustion and being taken advantage of. So I'm not sure what the net loss or gain would be, but that's a sad
I think
outcome.
It's a net loss. It's sad, and we're not supporting those people. There's still places that don't have the right protective gear. What are we, 9 months into this thing? It's nuts. So anyway, I see places going to hospitals 500 miles away, 1,000 miles away, saying, can you take this sick guy in? And we're all looking at the death numbers, so we know it's getting worse, and it's going to continue to get worse.
Yeah.
So healthcare workers, no doubt, first in line. There's a lot of them. They're going to suck up the initial supply, I think, of vaccine. But if there's any left over, probably headed toward nursing homes, high vulnerability people, a lot of deaths there. And the people who work there, the staff. And I think there's a fair amount of consensus about that.
Okay, yes, but I also saw, and Dr. Caplan is a great follow on Twitter, at Arthur Caplan. Another tweet of yours as I'm prepping to talk to you about nursing homes, and that I think it was, and I just saw the tweet, I didn't read the article, I'm not sure that you can go into detail on this, but it was a shocking outcome that the for-profit nursing homes have worse outcomes with COVID than the not-for-profit. And let me just interpret that the for-profit nursing homes are generally people with more means, more money, their family, whatever puts them in a nursing home, pays for better treatment, better quality of care, et cetera, and they're getting worse outcomes on COVID?
Yeah, and I think it's because they've been cutting staffing and for years watching the bottom line more than they have been attendant helper ratio. Doesn't mean every for-profit is terrible, but on average, they do worse. The numbers are clear. So why we have for-profit nursing homes at the end of the day, I don't understand anyway. We should all have not-for-profit nursing homes and let them make the money that they make. They should put back in nursing homes, not buy cars and hotel chains and other malarkey. You can tell private equity loves nursing homes. They're drawn to invest in it. To me, that's a bad sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Generally speaking, and I want to be general because I'm sure there are some great things they invest in. I wanted to ask you, of course, about this conference we're going to talk about in a moment that you're hosting Wednesday at 5. But before I move on, any other questions or points on the vaccines that you think are really important to get out there?
Yeah. So when we're talking about vaccines moving out, they're getting early approvals. They're not really licensed yet. We'll see that as more data comes in. But here's a weird thing that listeners will be interested in. Let's say I'm in one of the big trials for Pfizer, and I don't know if I'm in the placebo group, I didn't get it, or I'm in the group that got the experimental vaccine. Now I hear this thing's going to be approved for use in healthcare workers. Well, a lot of the people who signed up for the trials are healthcare workers. So I'm starting to think, I don't want to be in the placebo group. I want to go get that vaccine. So ethically, do we have to unblind is the word, that is tell people you're in the placebo group and you should have the same right to get the vaccine as anybody else, which then ruins the study because everybody we were tracking in the placebo group to see if they got infected jumps, well, not everybody, but many of them jump over and just get vaccinated with the early approval vaccine. And that leaves us not knowing, really, is this thing really doing what it says? Because we're not running the trials.
Right.
I think we're going to get stuck that way.
Yikes. Well, that just brought up two other quick questions, which I've heard a lot of listeners ask me about. Are we going to have to pay for the vaccine? That would seem immoral. And a better no is the answer. And the better question is one that you and other bioethicists are debating. Should we pay people to get the vaccine? It's always an interesting question. Usually people, have a knee-jerk reaction. No, personal responsibility. But there's some really interesting studies and research out there about paying people, for example, to lose weight. Hey, if it works, it brings down the cost of healthcare for everybody. On the question of vaccine, should we pay people?
No, because it really gives a signal that we don't think this thing is safe. And some people interpret it as, you have to pay me to take it. I can't trust what you're telling me.
It all goes to Bill Gates and George Soros, too.
And his big pharma buddies. So I think the answer is educate, get it out there. We're not going to have enough vaccine until January, February, March to get anybody else but healthcare workers, the people who work at hospitals, first responders, nursing homes. That's where it'll go. And then it's going to go to people who are older and people who have chronic conditions. So by the time we roll out all those folks, and let's assume that they do well, and we do track it, even if we can't do the studies, we can follow all these people that we gave it to, and it looks good, then people won't have to be paid. The rest of people are going to say, hey, I want to get back on an airplane. I want to be able to go to an indoor restaurant again. I'll get vaccinated. Because that's what's going to happen. People ask me about mandates. Nobody's going to have a government mandate. The police aren't going to come chase you down to vaccinate you. What's going to happen is the airline, the bus, the train is going to say, you can't get on here unless you show me a vaccination certificate. Private companies.
People are talking so much about the vaccines being the end game, and obviously that's a huge part of it. But you've also been talking about having accurate, rapid tests available everywhere. And I think I saw a tweet that said that would end the pandemic, 10 to 20 million tests. Explain where we are on that, why we haven't implemented it. And it's my understanding that no country necessarily has.
Some have. New Zealand, I think, maybe using it, and they've got the thing tamped down. But
they've only got 7 people on an island. I mean, how hard can it be?
A little easier than here, I'll grant that. But still, you have a situation where if we did, the rapid testing isn't as accurate as the thing that goes up your nose. That's more accurate. But if you took it every day and you found people positive, then you know who to isolate, and you don't have to shut down everything else. So even if people lied and said, I'm negative and wandered out anyway, just having some home test kit that you could keep taking once a day affordably, not for $150 a test or whatever it is, but for like $5 a day, a couple times a week. The obvious advantage is you just say, look, if it's positive, I don't know how accurate it is, but you stay home for 2 weeks and we'd stamp this thing out. It's crazyville not to be doing this.
Well, the issue is more cost than anything else for the rapid test. Because I read at a restaurant in New York City, City Winery, I've performed there a number of times, they're charging their customers $50 for a test. So if you want to go eat, you're out you're out $50 before you even get to the appetizer or a drink. But, I guess obviously it's
the cost is a huge issue. There still aren't enough tests around. We haven't made enough to do what I'm talking about. And the regulators are nervous that they're not accurate enough. But I think, if you test positive in a home test that costs $5 3 times in a week, stay home.
Right.
Maybe it's not as accurate, but hey, it'll make it easier for everybody else. And again, you can open up schools. You can have more people wandering around the restaurants. You can maybe do the gym and the bar and the haircut place again. Now we shut down everything to catch the same spread. You know what I mean? So I'm all for a lot more rapid testing, even if it's less accurate.
You and I are talking on Sunday. It's football Sunday. You're wearing a Philadelphia Eagles shirt, and you also are aware of what's going on with the NFL this weekend. And I wanted to get your take on it. But before, I read this morning that the Denver Broncos, all 4 of their quarterbacks have to quarantine because COVID exposure. Do you know who they're using for quarterback?
Yeah.
A wide receiver from the practice squad who has never played an NFL game. I haven't watched a game yet this year, but I'm watching that one. But more seriously, what are the issues around the way professional football, the NFL, has handled this?
NFL is weird. Here's why. The NFL is a league that gets injuries and terrible health outcomes just doing ordinary things that they do. Right. Forget COVID. People get concussions, smashed bones, broken knees. It's a horrible thing.
It's a bioethicist nightmare of professional football because you love the game.
Right. And a lot of people just said, I can't, in good faith, watch it. I still do, but I regret it in some ways because I think it's too barbaric.
Yeah. Same.
So the attitude toward COVID has been, you know what? It's just another injury. We'll keep going. If the 4 quarterbacks get sick, then we'll play, a wide receiver who never did it before, and we're just playing the games. Baltimore, I think they have 20 players out. COVID, they're still playing. They rescheduled their game and moved it. So NFL, for those who are really cognizant of this thing, means not for long. Yeah. That's the attitude that players have about being in this league.
Right.
And the NFL doesn't care. That's what I'm trying to say about COVID. It tests. It does what it needs to do to get rid of people who are infected. And it tries to get you to wear a mask and distance. But at the end of the day, they got a roster of 100 guys, and they just fill in when people get sick from COVID. It's crazy. And fans watch it, even though it's not really competitive. Your starters are all doing their playing. Nobody's.
You refuse to consider the fact the reason why fans are watching this game is because they think they might be able to play. They might be asked to come out of the stands. Can anybody throw? Get in there.
I think in Denver they asked if a coach could.
Yes, they did, and the coach was like 50. He's probably like, I might.
It's like Mike Tyson and Roy Jones having this big fight.
Whoever thought of that and put Snoop in the play-by-play was a genius. Yeah. All right, so final question for you is about this conference. This Wednesday, December 2nd at 5 p.m., you can participate and watch. Dr. Caplan has created a working group on ethics and policy, the Vaccine Working Group on Ethics and Policy at NYU. And this is to take a look at how young people are dealing with all things COVID. High school and college students talking about the pandemic, including views on vaccines, expectations that are placed on them, and their experiences over the last several months, which I think is going to be so fascinating. I did this back in March. I talked to 4 high school students for an episode. Obviously, I talked to my own daughters quite a bit. But I also read, and this isn't quite related, but right before you and I got on, I read that there's more suicides in Japan than COVID deaths. We all realize everybody is subject to the anxiety and depression that COVID has created. But young people, I think it's most importantly to understand how they're dealing with it. Why are you doing this, and what do you hope to find out with these folks?
Outside from that episode you did and maybe 1 or 2 others, I haven't heard many panels that have anybody under 50 talking about what's going on, including me. First and foremost, I want to hear from them.
Right.
Many of them have been afflicted with mental health issues, and quarantining with their parents probably is the least enjoyable thing ever assembled for a teenager or college kid. A lot of them are blamed for bringing disease back because they're not acting, quote unquote, responsibly. Some of them are thinking, hey, it doesn't get us sick, or at least as sick. Do I have to really change my whole lifestyle to protect grandma? Or maybe I could quarantine before I go home to protect grandma. What do they think about getting vaccinated? They're not in the first line of folks to get it, but would they? Are they? I haven't heard their attitudes. I don't know what they believe about it. The questions go on and on about how they're coping, what they think about going to school remotely, what they think about going to college. Some have tried, some haven't. If they took time off, what are they doing? So I think listeners are going to get an earful, both from the panel, a couple of high school kids, a couple of college kids we picked, and I'm going to moderate it. Hold on a second. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Hello?
Extended warranty on your car?
No, I think it was the Chinese lady.
She calls me all the time. Those are all really important concerns. I'm so glad that you're doing this. I'd be really interested to watch it. And anybody that wants to join, there's a link in today's show notes. You can also visit Arthur on Twitter and get a link at Arthur Caplan. But yeah, I mean, these are really important, serious issues, and it affects young people completely different than older folks. I mean, one of the things I said to my daughters is like, listen, I'm not necessarily worried about dying because I'm in good health, and so is your mom, but we can't work if we get really sick. And obviously I don't want to give it to anybody else. But they don't have those concerns. They're not getting as sick. Like I said before, we thought my daughter had it. She's tested negative, but her symptoms were not too severe. Is what I'm saying. Like, it hasn't been that bad at all for her so far. And I don't think, maybe she doesn't have it, but nonetheless, the point is she's not that worried.
Some listeners are no doubt thinking, well, I've heard stories that there are some kids who got very sick, and that's true, but it's rare. And most of the time, I don't know, if you're under 35, you get it and you kind of push on. It's true we haven't studied everything to know about possible long-term health consequences, but nonetheless, what I think about at age 70 is not what your daughter's thinking about. So it's a different game, different set of considerations, and we should hear that. And the other reason to do this and for people to pay attention is the future. Mandates, what happens, it's them, it's not us.
Yes.
So how they've learned from this, what they put up with from government, what they think about dealing with the next pandemic. I'm interested in that too.
Well, you got 5 great panelists, and that is this Wednesday at 5 p.m. You can register. Link in the show notes. I'm really looking forward to that, and you moderating. That'll be great. I'm always appreciative of your time, and I cannot thank you enough for your wisdom and knowledge on these issues. Thanks for sharing them with me, as always, Art. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, the great Dr. Arthur Caplan, bioethicist at NYU. Always awesome to catch up with him at least once a month or so. I love that we get access to him. Thank you for your support on the podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, 790. We are 10 away from 800. I just looked. That's what the deal is. We need to get 10 people. Can we do it today? Gift a subscription to somebody else. Send them an email with a link to it saying, welcome to an amazing community and an amazing podcast where we all learn so much each and every day. It's posted daily. Welcome to it. Whatever you want to write, that would be great. And longtime listener, subscriber, supporter, and now friend of mine, Dr. Prakash Gatta, was a regular caller to the old show. I always loved taking his calls, even though his phone always sucked. And now I get to talk to him on a regular basis, and he's just a great guy to talk to and consult with and be friends with. He's a general surgeon where he saves lives every day out in Washington State. We caught up last week just to talk about how he's doing, his outlook on things, and he's always inspiring and thoughtful, and I hope that you'll like this conversation with Dr. Prakash Gatta on Twitter at Gatta, Gatta Surgeon, at Gatta Surgeon. All right, well, I have got Dr. Prakash Gatta joining me again. I love talking to this guy. I've just given you the intro, of course, and it's great to get you back on. I wanted to talk to you about, just check in with you, how you're doing here at the holiday time and what you're seeing at your hospital, how your own health and your community is, but and just check in with you, buddy. I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, Pete, it's always great to talk to you, and I really appreciate the chance to have the opportunity to reach out to your listeners, and I feel we're now a community of one. We follow Pete till the end of time.
Well, let's be easy with the symbolism of following. We're just a bunch of people talking. I don't want to be I don't think I'm the leader. I think
you are the leader.
The catalyst for creating the community, but it's always a conversation, a give and take, and I don't want anybody to think that they can't... You know,
when the brown shirts come to pick us up, we're just going to point at you and say, he made me do it. So, no, the point is that as a listener, now a friend of yours, I appreciate the chance to reach out to your other listeners, because when I used to call into your show, it would be a conversation between you and me.
Yep.
And now it's you, me, and all of your, all of the cohort of Pete followers. So I love this chance.
Tell people again, when did you yourself get diagnosed with COVID? Your whole family had it, right? When did you get it? And how? I know that your recovery has been slow, and you're having some kind of minor setbacks with your breathing and other symptoms. How are you? When did you get it, and how are you doing now?
So it's late March, seems so long ago. And I was amongst the very, very first people that I know who ever got it to Washington State, which is where I live, Seattle area, greater Seattle area. We were amongst the first. We were basically thought to be the first state that ever got the infection rate picked up here. So we were amongst the very first to get infected, sort of getting back into work or reentering society. Back then, there was, I feel, a lot more uncertainty than there is now. So I think it is hard for me to separate getting the virus back then, along with the family, with the associated fear of like not knowing enough about the pathophysiologies and how many days am I going to be sick? Am I going to get better or worse? And we hear cases of people who've been in the hospital for like 4 months. Some make it, some don't. So at that point of uncertainty, sir, we didn't know which one of us, if any one of us, were going to be really sick. So I think that it's very hard to sort of separate that fear, and it is something that I don't wish on people. So it's very hard for people to relate to that. Most people will do very well, but the fear of the uncertainty of an unknown virus 9 months ago, we've learned a lot since then, but not knowing how to do the management, et cetera, that was really, I think, that the most memorable thing. So over the subsequent few months, I lost a significant amount of weight, never really got better and never really regained it, but periods of shortness of breath, weakness, etc. Lingering, they have been. Maybe it's because I'm now in 43, but in the meanwhile, I did get checked, and my heart function is normal, my lungs are working, but it feels like there's a part of me that feels different. Even mentally, sometimes there are periods where you'd be more fatigued than expected, maybe not functioning quite as highly. But I'm a surgeon. My job is to be highly functional. That hasn't changed, and we've been very, very busy with work. Some of it is catch up, and it's about to change again with an upcoming surge.
When you go into the hospital, how much concern do you have? I mean, having had the virus already, I guess you've got the antibodies. So I guess are you not concerned? Just let's be clear about getting it again.
I feel I'm less concerned, but I do still follow all the precautions and PPEs and masks, etc. The point is there's deferring data. So if you look at the vaccines that are coming out, all of them are sort of two vaccines separated by a few weeks, which would mean that the immunity would be higher for anybody getting infected twice. So since I got infected once, it's possible to say that the immunity would last only a certain number of months. There's some data to show that. So given that fact, people who have been infected may have a higher rate of, may at some point 3 to 6 months on be you can get reinfected is the bottom line. So there is a lingering fear. I feel a little bit less worried about it than somebody who's never been infected, but that is a reality. To answer your question, you walk into the hospital. I think the hospitals, for the most part, have done a better job of controlling infections within the hospital. So if somebody comes in that's COVID positive, we isolate them, we treat them in a specific ward. We have more PPEs and masks and protection that we didn't have earlier in the year. So I would say that the transmission rate walking into the hospital is probably low for the healthcare workers. Every patient who gets surgery gets a COVID test, prior to the operations, anybody walking in for an elective procedure. So there are some checks and balances, which is good. We've learned how the viruses transmit. The one thing that really changed over the summer was the fact that the whole 6 foot thing doesn't really matter because it is not droplets. It's an aerosolized virus, which means you could be in an elevator or a closed room and breathe, not cough, and still transmit the virus. So we've seen that from all the rallies happen over the summer, probably indoor rallies. There was a transmission rate that was real. So we've, like I said, our thinking has evolved and we know more about it. It's less of an unknown entity. A lot of it is not great news. But I'm hopeful that we have some good news around the corner.
Well, the not great news is that we're headed into the dark winter, as President-elect Joe Biden refers to it, and I like that. I've been using the phrase "the dark winter" because it's literally dark winter, but then the darkness of the pandemic as well, I think, is of huge concern. And yet, so many people in so many states are still not even wearing masks, distancing, and I think the biggest concern is this is the time of year. Certainly, one of the peak times for people to travel and to get together. And it's one thing if you keep the virus in your town, but when you start traveling to my town and your town and bringing the virus with you, that is how it spreads. So we've got different states following different regulations and the splinter between ideologically Americans on masks and on all of it. And therefore, until we have a vaccine distributed, we have a major concern given the holidays. And I've been hearing, obviously, we've all been hearing in conjunction and overlapping with flu season. So what are your concerns about, let's say, the next 6 weeks or so?
Yeah, so very good point. It's very discouraging to read the news reports about the travel numbers are higher than anticipated, despite the numbers, infection rates being so high, especially in the last week. There's a significant percentage of traditional travelers who have not canceled travel. So there's a lot of people doing Thanksgiving travel. I wish that wasn't the case. We had the same concern coming out of Fauci a couple of days ago. So I think that the next month to 6 weeks, like you said, are going to be really bad in terms of infection numbers and rates and growth. That's very concerning to me. Now, if we had 200,000, between 150 to 200,000 a day for the last 2 weeks, I think that we're going to hit 250,000 potential new infections per day in a month or so from now, once the traveling settles down, and that's going to be a problem. the good thing, there's nothing good about it, but the percentage of people getting sick, maybe younger, the mortality rate is lower than before. Earlier in the virus, there was a lot of transmission with the nursing homes, older population. Maybe that has changed to a more broader population. We test more people. Also, the point is that we're learning. There's a couple of theories as to why this affects certain people, even young. One of the theories is it's an interferon based virus where people with no immunity to interferon, which is one of your own immunity proteins, are the ones that suffer. So that is sort of another therapeutic line that can be considered.
What is it? Interferon? What is that? I've never even heard that word.
Yeah, interferon is a protein that the body makes, which is part of our immune system. And, in the past, it's been known interferon-based therapies have been used for treating.
Well, can I take some interferon supplements? Is anybody selling those? Joe Rogan?
No, man. So it's primarily a synthetic drug companies would make it to fight like hepatitis C in the past when we didn't have really good treatments, whereas now we do have treatments. So that is one of the theories. Is another theory called bradykinin response, which is again part of the immune system. The bottom line is it is certain people whose immune systems get triggered. Not like you getting triggered, Pete, but the immune system getting triggered. And that is where the side effects and the actual symptoms and some people with respiratory conditions happen. So I feel fortunate that didn't happen to me. I would consider myself having sort of a moderate disease set and not as bad as other people. One of the things I wanted to bring up, and we've discussed this before, is the fact that I think in terms of vaccine news or news in general, there's been two important subsets of good news. Before I get to that, I wanted to say that the infection rates being high, I think there's two reasons for that. One is sort of the ideological culture of certain governors or leaders in states, and the fact that this was an election year, which is the worst thing that could have possibly happened because there's a lot of politically driven decision making, which has actually, I would say, translates into loss of life. And the second thing, and no one can be blamed for, which is pandemic fatigue. Washington State, we have not had in-person school for 9 months. And there's certain states that have only not had in-person school for 2 or 3 months, and they're fed up. So I would say that people who are in states where, even California has certain days of in-person schools. I was talking to some of my friends. So I would say their frustrations should be relative. Someone's always got it worse than you. So I think our school system being shut down for so long is quite frustrating. And there's mounting evidence. We know this because Florida opened everything up 2 months ago, that opening up in-person schooling does not seem to translate into higher community transmission rate, does not seem to translate into higher mortality within kids or school teachers, although some will suffer. And there's obviously risk, but it's not as high as feared. So I think that if you truly follow the science, Gavin Newsom shouldn't go to an in-person dinner or in-house. That's one thing. The second thing is I do think that soon we should hopefully get to a point where people are comfortable opening schools.
The idea that they would close schools before they would close bars and restaurants is outrageous to most people, including me.
Makes no sense to me.
Yeah. How do you feel about these vaccines when you look at them? I know you're not a vaccine expert, but I mean, I was reading about it and talking about it with someone earlier, and it would seem that these vaccines are more effective in terms of will treat it the way the measles is treated versus the way that the flu is treated. In that, I mean, these vaccines are a lot more effective, and the vaccine could be permanent as opposed to the flu vaccine, which we've got to get every year and isn't always that effective. And partially, of course, because not enough people get the shot, and partially, of course, because it's not always the right, perfectly right strain, because the flu, I guess, it mutates. Am I making any sense here?
So we don't have a perfect influenza vaccine every year because it does mutate year on year, which is the reason most influenza vaccines that are released are from the previous year. And they're releasing it, and you and I would get that. It would only give us at the most 50 to 60% protection. That's still a lot, but it's not 100%. So yes, the influenza vaccine is different. Virus is different. One of the fears that we didn't talk about ever before, and the fact in the scientific community, the fact that the coronavirus is an adenovirus, very similar to the cold virus. So there's no cold virus vaccine, right?
Right.
So there was a fear that none of these vaccines would work at all.
Yeah, that's what I thought that fear was like likely.
Yeah, no, it was. I would say that more than the general public, the people within the scientific community were a lot more fearful about the fact that we would come up with only 50% efficacy for these vaccines, or that it wouldn't work at all, or you would need more than 2 or 3 jabs, or we couldn't sort of distribute it in an effective way, it would be too expensive. So there's all these sort of logistical fears, and the bottom line being that the vaccines wouldn't work for this. It would be similar to the cold virus. That was the primal fear. And if that was the case, if the last 2 weeks had shown all 3 vaccines fail, we would be in a lot worse situation. The stock market would have crashed, and everybody would realize that this is a years long process where everybody has to be infected to get herd immunity. So on a positive light, all 3 vaccines have shown incredible efficacy, far beyond what anybody would have really expected. So the first 2 that were released, the Pfizer vaccine as well as the Moderna vaccine, are mRNA-based vaccines. It's a viral protein that works, that you get vaccinated, you receive it, and your body reacts, and the immunity gets kicked in and attacks that protein of the virus, and therefore kills the virus if you were to be infected. And the phase 3 trial that were released for both, although a smaller subset of patients in the hundreds, about 200 each, showed that the arm that received the vaccine for both vaccines, Moderna as well as the Pfizer vaccine versus the placebo, the infection rate was essentially limited by 90 to 95%. So that, the simplest way I can describe it is you are a lot more susceptible to not to the virus if you got a placebo. In other words, if you didn't get a vaccine for those 2. The difference between Pfizer and Moderna is the fact that you distribute it in a different way. The Pfizer vaccine requires like super cold temperatures. Moderna is a lot easier to distribute. And then the third vaccine that just came out, which is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, works. It's basically a live virus and sort of a weakened live virus, as opposed to mRNA, which is just a protein, which is not alive. It's a little different. It's similar to the smallpox, the Salk versus the other vaccines, both which were effective. The AstraZeneca vaccine, which just got released, coming from Oxford, seems like it can be stored at room temperatures, which is a huge plus, especially for the rest of the world who may not have the infrastructure for distributing a vaccine at minus 74 Fahrenheit, which is what the Pfizer vaccine is. So I think all 3 will have the roles in terms of where it needs to get to what. Suppose you were shipping out vaccines to our military members. I think the AstraZeneca vaccine would be the right one. So we don't know. And the next challenge would be the distribution. So the biggest thing that we've solved with the operation is the fact that the vaccines are effective. That is phenomenal news. The next problem is the rubber has to meet the road. We have to get these made at scale, produced, distributed.
And you were trying to give credit before we started recording to Trump because he oversaw Operation Warp Speed, and I told you we're not going to do that. He gets 0 credit for doing what any other politician would get. And then I also have read, and to add to that, because he refuses to concede, it's obviously making the transition way, way more difficult than it is normally. And the main cause, obviously, we worry about national security implications. People have speculated about 9/11 could have maybe been prevented if there wasn't a long court trial for the 2000 Bush v. Gore. And now, but the concern is obviously the transition to vaccine and getting it distributed and how that's going to be handled, and the fact that Donald Trump is doing everything he can to prevent the transition from occurring and not conceding puts us all in a lot of danger. So not only does he not get credit for doing what anybody would have done, and as a matter of fact, he probably would have tried to profit from it and probably did in some way if he could. But now he's making it harder to do what you just said, which is the hardest thing.
Let's just say that thankfully nobody was able to stop the scientific community within the U.S. from producing these phenomenal vaccines. The Oxford vaccine is, of course, in the UK based, and it's a French company. But the bottom line is all these companies have received massive grants from the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Taxpayers have funded it. And I think the vaccine should be distributed for free for all of our citizens and hopefully for the rest of the world. There should be no profit motive here, because you wouldn't have a planet if you, have people pay for the vaccine. The biggest, there was a modeling done by the U.S. Defense Department about 2 years ago. And one of the modeling was what would be one of the biggest national security threats. It's not if China has an aircraft carrier. It was something like this. It was a pandemic that we had no control over. And look at the news. It came out today that Vladimir Putin is still refusing, is not comfortable congratulating Biden yet.
Right.
Everybody knows Biden's the president, and he's going to be sworn in. But the only reason you wouldn't do it is to sow confusion and to show the world that we are weak in this transition period. So if you show weakness, which is not conceding, I'm not a political person, but I have political beliefs. Not conceding is a sign of weakness to the world, that there is instability in the transition of government. That is something that our enemies will capitalize on. There's no question. So if you're truly a patriot, you would tell people to move on. I think the Trump movement has accomplished a lot. I disagree with most of it. He got more people to vote for him this time than last time. So I think they've made their point, and I respect the way they're voted. But it is time to move on in the midst of a crisis.
But more importantly, it's about not being thoughtful about your fellow man or woman. It's about not caring about your community, especially if you haven't met them or don't know them or they're not part of your tribe. We have to. It's not about patriotism. It's about being a good person. And to be a good person is to join a community and make sacrifice. And that's the final thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is how important that is and how this country can't seem to understand that term. If we ever did, people talk about the greatest generation and so on, but a sacrifice can be described in so many different ways. But we hear that word a lot in reference to COVID in terms of everybody has to sacrifice. And certain Americans of a certain strain of ideology, don't tell me what to do, Dr. Gatta. Don't you tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to live my life. I don't have to make any, people don't say this, but that's what they're doing, not making any sacrifices. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that it is an easy argument to make that this is the government imposing their will of somebody else. But the point is, these same people, if they don't want to wear masks, they still wear seatbelts. That's a state regulation. They follow the speed limit, right? So it's not like if you consider yourself free, that means that you're a sovereign citizen. No laws apply to you. That means you can drive in a 25 zone at 60. No one should be able to stop you. So the bottom line is, as a civic, as a community, as a society, everybody follows, for the most part, follows the civic norms. This is one of them. It has been politicized. The masking and social distancing has been politicized primarily because I think this 2020 has been an election year, which I think that maybe it's a bad, terrible coincidence. It was a test to the democratic system and to the American people to keep it together and vote the way they did, still go out in record numbers despite the risks put to them. And it is a testament to the fact that this country will survive no matter how different we are and how much people try to divide us. And I think our current political leadership is trying to divide us and divide us and split us in such a way that these fissures are permanent. And I think, even if there's a Trump TV and there's a sort of same kind of propaganda happening in the future, I think people will move on because Americans, at the end of the day, we got to get stuff done, man. I mean, so I think we have, so the way I would look at it is the message has been heard. I think we need to move forward as one nation. We just can't otherwise, that's the bottom line, yeah.
Dr. Prakash Gatta, I love talking to you, man. I appreciate you joining me and supporting me and listening to the show and being part of the community, and keep up the good work out there. Thank you, sir.
I'm very proud to call you my friend, Pete, and thank you for this opportunity.
Of course, pal. Anytime. All right, that is it. Thank you very much for listening to my conversations with both Dr. Arthur Caplan and Dr. Prakash Gatta. Hit both of them up on Twitter. Let them know that you heard them here, and let your friends know about the show. Spread the word. If we can get 10 more subscribers for the show today, we can get to 800. That'd be amazing. If you're still listening, spread the word, gift a subscription, and be good to each other. I will see you anytime on the Discord platform. Hit me up there, where you're never alone if you're part of the stand-up community. And I'll talk to you right here tomorrow on Stand Up.